Hello everyone, let's learn about the fourth chapter from novel A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. So the chapter is the second of the three spirits. Let's see what happens in this chapter. At 2 o'clock, Scrooge woke up because he heard a strange voice calling him by his name, Scrooge. He stood up and started looking around to see what had called him. He realized clearly that he was still in his bedroom. But the room had changed in a surprising and magical way. Green plants were hanging on the walls and ceiling, making the room look like a garden. It looked just like a beautiful garden. Leaves and berries decorated all the walls. The floor was full of delicious food, drinks, and treats. A happy giant was sitting on the couch, holding a bright, glowing torch like a big light. Come here and get to know me better. Scrooge walked slowly and shyly, looked down in front of the spirit. Timidly means shyly. The spirit said, I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look at me. Scrooge looked at the spirit. It was wearing a plain green robe with the border of white fur, clothing dressed. The robe was not tight, it hung freely on the body. It had a crown made of holly leaves and shining icicles, means ice pieces on its head. Its curly dark brown hair was long and hanging freely. The spirit had a kind face and bright shining eyes. The spirit's voice was happy and it spread warmth and happiness. Radiated means spread. The spirit said, You have never seen anyone like me before. Scrooge replied, Never. The spirit said, I have over 1800 older brothers. Each Christmas present from past years is like a brother. The ghost stood up. Scrooge said politely and humbly, Take me wherever you want. Submissively means humbly and obediently. I went with the earlier ghost because I was forced to go. Compulsion means forcefully. I learned something from him that is affecting me now. Tonight, if you want to teach me something, let me gain benefit from it. The ghost said, Touch my robe. Robe means cloak or dress. Scrooge did exactly what the spirit told him to do and held on to him tightly. Together they stood in the streets of the city on Christmas morning. All around them, people were joyfully singing and playing music while they were busy clearing thick snow from the pathways in front of their houses and from the rooftops. Although the sky looked dull and cloudy and the streets were covered in mist, there was still a feeling of joy in the air. The weather itself was not pleasant, but people were cheerful and happy. The ones cleaning the rooftops were especially jolly and full of excitement. They called out to one another and sometimes they threw snowballs or cracked jokes, laughing loudly. Then the sounds of church bells filled the air, and the crowds of people walked through the streets, dressed in their best clothes and wearing happy expressions, all heading to church. At the same time, many people came out from narrow streets, hidden lanes, and unnamed paths, carrying their uncooked food to the bakers, to the bakers' shops to be cooked for their Christmas meals. Watching these poor but happy people made the spirit very interested and pleased. He and Scrooge remained invisible to everyone. As they stood near the doorway of baker's shop, the spirit lifted the food covers of the dishes that people carried and sprinkled incense from the torch onto the food. His torch was not like ordinary torches. It was quite special. Once or twice, when people bumped into each other or began to argue, the spirit would sprinkle a few drops of water from the torch, and immediately they would calm down and return to good humor. People would say it was a shame to argue on Christmas Day, and it truly was. Then Scrooge asked the spirit if there was something special in what he sprinkled from his torch. The spirit replied that yes, there was, and it was his own special kind of magic or feeling. Scrooge then asked if this special quality from the torch could be used for any kind of dinner on Christmas Day. The spirit replied that it worked on any meal that was shared kindly and especially when it was given to the poor people. Scrooge asked why the spirit showed preference to dinners for the poor. The spirit answered simply because the poor needed it most. Then the spirit and Scrooge continued their journey, still invisible, and moved towards the outer parts of the town, the suburbs. Although the spirit was very large in size, he was able to adjust and fit into any space easily. He was full of kindness and had a warm hearted nature, always showing great sympathy for poor people. Come to page number 53 now. The spirit took Scrooge straight to the home of Bob Cratchit, who was Scrooge's clerk. When they reached the doorsteps of the house, the spirit smiled and stopped for a moment. He then blessed the Cratchit's small home by sprinkling something from his torch on it. Inside the house, Mrs. Cratchit got up from her cooking. She was dressed in an old and simple gown with cheap ribbons. Though her clothes were not fancy, she was doing her best. She began setting the table, helped by her second daughter, Belinda. Meanwhile, Peter Cratchit, the eldest son, was wearing one of his father's favorite shirts. He was near the cooking and used a fork to check on the potatoes boiling in a saucepan. Then two younger Cratchit children, a boy and a girl, came running into the house, shouting excitedly. They had been near the bakery and said they had smelled the goose cooking and were sure it was theirs. They were so thrilled that they danced around the table and praised their brother Peter loudly while he blew on the fire to make it burn hotter. The potatoes boiled so much that they knocked against the lid of the pot, almost asking to be taken out and peeled. Mrs. Cratchit, watching the time, wondered what was keeping their dear father and Tiny Tim from arriving. Just then, the two younger children shouted excitedly that their father was coming. Bob Cratchit, their father, entered the house wearing his white apron. His clothes were thin, patched, and carefully sewn, but he had brushed them well to look neat. Tiny Tim was sitting on his father's shoulders as he came in. Tiny Tim carried a little crutch and his weak legs were supported by a metal frame. The two younger children gently helped bring Tiny Tim into the kitchen so he could enjoy the sound of the Christmas pudding that is bubbling in the cooking pot. Mrs. Cratchit then asked how Tiny Tim had behaved that day. Tiny Tim was cheerful and full of the Christmas spirit. People would see him in the church and feel touched because he was a crippled boy, and his presence reminded them of God's miracles. How he helped the lame to walk and the blind to see. Whenever people saw Tim, they silently prayed for him, hoping he would be able to walk and play like other children someday. Bob felt emotional and his voice shook when he shared this with others. Tiny Tim's crutches made a sound as he moved across the floor. His brother and sister helped him to his stool at the dinner table. Peter and the two of the Cratchit children went to fetch the goose Christmas dinner. They brought it back in a proud like a parade. Then there was a lot of activity. Mrs. Cratchit made gravy that sizzled in a saucepan. Peter mashed the potatoes. Belinda sweetened the applesauce. Martha cleaned the hot plates. Bob gently took Tiny Tim to a small seat at the table. Two Cratchit children set the table for everyone. When the food was ready, they said a prayer. Mrs. Cratchit then cut the goose as the delicious stuffing came out. Everyone felt happy, even Tiny Tim feeling thrilled. Taped his knife and fork and said in a weak voice, "Hurrah!" Bob said he had never seen such a well cooked goose before. It was tender, tasty, and good value for money. Everyone admired it. After the meal, Belinda cleaned the table. Mrs. Cratchit went to bring the pudding. In no time, she returned, red faced but proud. Bob praised the pudding and called it the best success Mrs. Cratchit had ever achieved, even more than their marriage. Everyone found something kind to say about it. Page number 56. After the pudding was tasted and found perfect, they added apples and oranges to the table and threw chestnuts into the fire. All the Cratchits gathered around the hearth fireplace in a circle. Bob, smiling, poured drinks from a jug. The chestnuts cracked loudly in the fire. Then Bob raised a toast and said, "A Merry Christmas to us all. My dears, God bless us." Everyone repeated it. Tiny Tim said it last and added, "God bless us, everyone." Tiny Tim sat very close to his father on a little stool. Bob held his small, weak hand tightly, as if he was afraid that the boy might be taken from him. Scrooge, watching this with the spirit, felt a new kind of interest. He asked the spirit, "Tell me, will Tiny Tim live?" Come to page number 57. The ghost replied that he saw an empty seat near the fireplace and a crutch with no one using it. If nothing changed, the child would die. Scrooge pleaded, "No, no, say he will be spared." The spirit coldly replied, "If he is going to die, he better do it and reduce the surplus population." Scrooge felt deep shame because these were the same heartless words he himself had used earlier. Now hearing them from the spirit made him feel sorrow and regret. The ghost scolded Scrooge for his cruel thoughts. He asked who gave Scrooge the right to decide who lives and who dies. The spirit added that in heaven's eyes, Scrooge might be less valuable than the poor child he had insulted. Scrooge, feeling ashamed and scared, lowered his eyes, but when he heard his name mentioned, he looked up. Bob Cratchit had said, Mr. Scrooge, I bless you. Mr. Scrooge, the founder of this feast. Mrs. Cratchit, blushing with anger, said sharply, Founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I would tell him what I think of him. Bob gently reminded her, It's Christmas Day, my dear. Students will continue the chapter next video. Thank you.